Up next in the broadcast, Seoul protests Tokyo's latest move to include Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo in Japan's new national security strategy. The government urges railway strikers to get back to work as supply shortages and commuter disruptions continue to rattle the nation. And cash-strapped Ukraine gets a $15 billion bailout from Moscow and a discount on Russian natural gas in a move to avoid national bankruptcy. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Wednesday, December 18th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with the latest on the ongoing nationwide rail strike, which the government wants brought to an immediate end.
Meanwhile, the Union of Cargo Truck Drivers says it won't pick up freight that's not being delivered because of the strike. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
The government is taking a hardline stance on the nationwide railway strike that has now gone on for 10 full days. Prime Minister Chung Oh-won called out striking railway union members on Wednesday, demanding they return to work as their strike is inconveniencing the public.
The strike is disturbing commuters, and the labor union's practice is leaving the government no choice but to enforce the laws the union is breaking.
The government is bearing down on one end and Korail on the other. The state-owned corporation has summoned around 150 Korail union members as part of its investigation into losses in compensation resulting from the strike. Union members continue to demand that the government scrape a plan to establish a new rail operator, something they claim is a first step toward privatization. In the meantime, prosecutors announced Wednesday that they're now seeking arrest warrants for 18 more union members, in addition to the 10 warrants issued Monday. The strike has crippled railway services nationwide, and cargo trains continue to be hit the hardest. And their operations have been cut virtually in half. A union of cargo truck drivers, 12,000 strong, said Wednesday that it won't pick up the freight that's not being delivered because of the railway strike. And experts say that if the strike continues, small and medium-sized businesses will soon be faced with supply shortages. Commuters are already starting to feel the pinch. Korail reduced its number of KTX Express trains by 12% Tuesday, and regular passenger trains are running on their restricted schedules at 60% their normal levels.
Usually there will be trains every hour, but because of the strike, I now have to wait for more than 2 hours for trains.
Since the strike began last Monday, some 8,000 union workers have walked off the job. In that time, about 900 have crossed back across the picket line. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's Supreme Court on Wednesday ruled that fixed regular bonuses must be viewed as part of ordinary wages.
The landmark ruling is expected to boost overall pay and benefits for employees here in the nation, while clarifying a long-time gray zone in the country's labor laws. Our Paul Yi reports.
The nation's top court has ruled that regular bonuses paid to workers in Korea must now be considered part of ordinary wages. The Supreme Court ruling made by 13 judges is expected to play an important role in how companies recognize ordinary wages for workers across the country. The so-called ordinary wage refers to the basic minimum wage paid to employees, but also acts as a benchmark for calculating certain allowances, such as overtime pay and severance packages. The new guidelines will now incorporate fixed bonuses into the final total of this basic wage, therefore potentially increasing statutory allowances and other benefits. The court clarified that certain fringe welfare benefits, such as holiday bonuses, cannot be viewed as part of standard wages, and that workers can retroactively request unpaid allowances dating back the last 3 years. Major labor unions have welcomed the ruling while expressing hope that the court's decision will change the practice of companies asking employees to work long hours and endure low wages. Korea's business community, however, say they're concerned the ruling will negatively impact the nation's economy due to higher employment costs. The Korea Federation of Small and Medium Business said the new guidelines will cost smaller firms more than $13.6 billion in the short term, with even heavier financial burdens down the line. Meanwhile, the government said it would consult with employers and labor unions to come up with new legislation that would fairly reflect the court's ruling. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Relations between Seoul and Tokyo took another step back on Wednesday over Japan's most recent unjustified claim to Korea's Tokdo Islands.
Our Tim and-gil has more on Seoul's former complaint with the Japanese embassy in Seoul.
Korea on Wednesday summoned the deputy chief of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, Takashi Kurai, to protest Japan's renewed claims to Korea's easternmost islet of Tokdo. It comes one day after Tokyo released a new national security strategy outline, which places a priority for a resolution to the standoff over the islets which Korea controls. Through Kurai, Korea's foreign ministry protested the fresh claim and demanded that Tokyo delete the Tokdo issue immediately from its security paper. Kurai said he would convey the message to the Japanese government. Seoul's foreign ministry took a strong tone Wednesday in response to the new defense policy paper.
The Japanese government's most recent unjustified claim to Tokdo in the form of a national security strategy raises doubts about Tokyo's sincerity in improving relations between Korea and Japan.
Japan's new defense policy package approved by the cabinet includes a 10-year national security strategy and a 5-year military build-up plan. It defines North Korea's nuclear and missile development programs as major threats and names China as a country trying to change the status quo in Northeast Asia. Japan says its security plan is defensive in nature. Tim and-gil, Arirang News.
Well, looming concerns of a possible provocation from North Korea have popped up in the highest chambers of the South Korean government following the sudden execution of Kim Jong-un's once powerful uncle.
Kim Hyun-bin reports on how South Korean and U.S. officials reviewed their joint efforts under all possible scenarios.
In light of the sudden removal of North Korea's former number 2 man, Chang Song-taek, South Korea and the U.S. held a high-level meeting Tuesday in Washington to formulate responses to all possible scenarios that could emerge in the North. South Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Kyu-hyun and U.S. Deputy Secretary William Burns vowed to enhance joint defense preparations to better prepare for the possibility of North Korea's provocations. They also agreed that the instability in North Korea could encourage the leadership to launch a provocation at some point in the near future to solidify its power base. The South Korean official said Seoul will maintain its current defense status to deter Pyongyang, but stressed that when necessary, South Korea was ready to take additional measures. Kim also highlighted the Seoul-Washington alliance and Seoul-Tokyo ties as the key factors that ensure peace and stability in Northeast Asia. In terms of diplomacy and security on the Korean peninsula, the two Koreas, U.S., China, Japan, and Russia play key roles and are also the members of the long-stalled six-party talks aimed at denuclearizing North Korea. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now we turn to the last of our 3-part series on Kim Jong-un's first 2 years in power.
Now, Hwang Sung-hee takes a look at how far North Korea's nuclear program has come and where it's headed.
Peace, national prosperity, and happiness of the citizens all come with strong nuclear power.
Kim Jong-un has made it clear that North Korea will never give up its nuclear program. And during his 2 years in power, the young leader has taken steps toward making the North a nuclear state.
The first one, the explosion power has increased. At the same time, now they enter into the new step that are focusing on miniaturizing and how to put this warhead into the long-range missiles.
But the significant steps in its nuclear program has taken Pyongyang further away from its closest ally, Beijing, as the North ignored China's warnings and went ahead with a rocket launch last December and a third nuclear test in February. Since then, China has joined in on international sanctions against the North and has steadily increased the economic pressure on its northern neighbor, in order to get it to denuclearize and return to dialogue. Experts say Pyongyang's constant belligerent actions have created a pretext for the expansion of U.S. involvement in the region, which is certainly not in Beijing's interest.
For China, the denuclearization of North Korea is important, but so is the maintenance of peace and stability in the north and the Korea-US-Japan-East Asia-Pacific rebalance policy.
But as much as the North does not want to break its ties with China, a nuclear-free North Korea does not seem an option for now.
There hasn't been a sufficient reduction in the security threats in the region and between the two Koreas for the North to end its nuclear program. So as a result, Pyongyang continues to have difficulty with making the strategic decision to denuclearize.
Beyond that, the communist state constantly proclaims that it was the dying wish of great leader Kim Il-sung and dear leader Kim Jong-il for the North to hold on to its nuclear weapons. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meeting came on the news, trying to cover up the South's true intentions. Well, taking you overseas, Russia has agreed to lend a helping hand to its cash-strapped neighbor, Ukraine, essentially bailing the country out by providing $15 billion in loans and a steep discount in natural gas prices. Connie Kim reports.
Dealing a blow to Brussels in its tussle over Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin has inked a deal with his Ukrainian counterpart, Viktor Yanukovych, under which Moscow will buy $15 billion worth of Ukrainian government bonds and slash the price of natural gas supplied to the country. Ukraine will be able to purchase gas from Russia's mostly state-controlled Gazprom at $268 per 1,000 cubic meters, which is roughly 30% lower than its previous price of $400. The deal signed in Moscow Tuesday comes after Ukraine said it needed at least $10 billion to avoid bankruptcy. The two leaders say the agreement will be mutually beneficial and reverse the decline of trade between the two countries. In Kiev Tuesday, some 50,000 pro-European Union protesters gathered in the city's main square, saying the Russian bailout will harm the country's independence. Leaders of the opposition parties coordinating the protests said they will continue on with their demonstrations. The protests were sparked by the government's last-minute decision to suspend plans to sign an integration pact with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A two-day meeting of vice ministers of finance and central bank officials from G20 countries have gathered here in Seoul on this Wednesday. While the Federal Open Market Committee meeting is currently underway in the United States, the conference centered its agenda on ways to mitigate the ripple effects from the fiscal policies of advanced countries. Arirang Song Ji-hye has the details.
Just one day before the Federal Reserve is set to announce whether it will be scaling back its bond-buying stimulus measures, policymakers from the world over gathered in Seoul for a G20 meeting hosted by Korea's finance ministry, where the possible effects on emerging markets topped the agenda.
To minimize disruption in the global financial market stemming from the QE taper, the G20 should continue to cooperate to manage the exit in an orderly manner.
The International Monetary Fund's Deputy Director of Strategy Policy and Review Department said government intervention would be critical in the event of volatility in the markets. He went on to say that Korea remains relatively safe compared to other emerging economies.
Korea has a very good and strong set of basic fundamental macroeconomic policy frameworks, and therefore it should, and it's also got deep financial markets, and therefore it should, as it has thus far, be able to cope with tapering without too much difficulty.
The meeting, which was held in cooperation with the Finance Ministry of Australia, the chair of next year's G20 meetings, marks the first of its kind hosted by Korea since the G20 summit in 2010. 200 officials and experts from the academic world were also in attendance. Apart from spillovers stemming from major economies' monetary policies, the participants also shared their views on the overall global economic conditions and achievements and challenges facing the G20. When the conference wraps up on Thursday, 31 of the participants will head to the Kaesong Industrial Complex for a tour of the facilities there. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korea's movie industry is about to smash yet another record. The number of cinema tickets sold so far this year is forecast to surpass 200 million for the first time ever later this week. Connie Lee has the details on how most of this year's biggest draws have been homegrown movies.
엄마 아팠어요. 내 머리 컸어.
From the comedic and romantic to the more dramatic and thrilling. No matter the genre, more Koreans are watching movies these days. So just how many did they watch at the theaters this year?
5개 정도 본 것 같아요.
2014년도에는 영화 2편밖에 안 봤어요.
10편 정도.
1년이면 한 20편, 25편.
According to recent numbers, each person in Korea watched an average of 4 movies at the theaters this year. This figure comes from the Korean Film Council, which says that the number of movie tickets sold so far in 2013 is expected to reach 200 million this week.
The 200 million ticket milestone is very significant because it shows that the Korean movie industry has the potential to expand and grow even more.
And by the end of this year, it'll surpass that number, posting a new record for Korea.
By the end of 2013, we predict that about 210 million tickets will have been sold. Considering Korea's population of 50 million, that's a lot of tickets sold.
And it looks like the Korean films drew in a larger audience. Nearly 60% of the total box office sales went to the homegrown films.
The quality of Korean films has increased incredibly. And not only did we have a lot of good local films this year, we had a lot of unexpectedly successful ones.
And looking at Korea's top 10 movies of this year, 8 of them were domestic, with the highest grossing film being Miracle in cell number 7, which drew in more than 12.8 million viewers.
And looking ahead, experts say that the number of moviegoers will only increase here in Korea, with more people in particular eyeing the domestic films. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
December 18th marks International Migrants Day, a day to raise awareness about the human rights and fundamental freedoms of migrants, the number of which worldwide reached 232 million in 2013.
And Korea has good reason to observe this day as migrant workers, immigrant wives, and North Korean defectors have made up a bigger portion of the population in the past decade. To shed light on the migration situation in Korea, we're joined by Kwak Jae-seok, director at the Migration and Diaspora Research Institute. Welcome.
Good to see you.
Well, let's start with some statistics. How many migrants are there in Korea, and has the number risen much over the past decade?
Yes. Apparently, there is a steep increase in migrants in Korea. Nowadays, 1.5 million migrants are living in Korea. We need some kind of policy targeting the Korean foreign workers in Korea for them to settle down in Korea.
Is that because they're not having a good time here? How are foreign workers and migrant workers feeling about their living and working conditions in Korea?
Compared to the domestic Koreans, they are relatively disadvantaged to joining to the job markets. to have a better to have a communication with the Korean people. These days, the Korean policy, the multicultural policy, is too much targeted on cultural point of view. So we need to fix this kind of point of view. We need migration point of view. So the government should make a policy for the migrants, international migrants, to have a better job with a better, with a more higher wages, and to have a better communication with the domestic Koreans.
Of course, I mean, few will deny that racial discrimination or xenophobia still exists in this country. How serious is the problem?
Very serious. People are now very worried about the higher rates of foreigners' crime rate. But higher percentage of the crime rates of foreigners are due to the conflict between Korean domestic people, and they don't understand each other. They don't know their others' culture.
Well, what's being done to resolve and overcome these challenges? Do you think this South Korean government is doing enough?
We need some kind of control tower. Each ministries are implementing many programs, but when I see that, they are all a little bit similar, resemble. They're imitating each other. So there is overlapping of budget, overlapping of programs. So we need control tower.
All right, well, thank you so much for all of your efforts in crafting that future here in Korea, and thanks for joining us tonight.
A major 8-player trade has sent waves through the Korean Basketball League.
And Stephen Che is in the Sports Center with the details of the deal. Stephen.
Hey guys, it's the biggest trade of the year so far. KT Sonic Boom and the Goyang Orions agreed on a 4-for-4 player deal that sends top guard Chun Tae-pung to KT and swaps 2 foreign players to fill their respective needs. And with that, let's get to Wednesday's top matchups starting in the KBL. Anyang KGC stunned the SK Knights 70-67 in the first of the doubleheader. But now it's time for the game of the night. The Mobis Phoebus took a road trip to Incheon to face the ET Land Elephants. Mobis starts with a fine first half, taking a 48-35 lead at the halftime buzzer. It's the Elephants' Ricardo Powell powering his team along, but Rod Benson and crew surge ahead. He finishes with 21-15, and Mobis takes it 87-73. Now on to the V-League. It's the third place Hyundai Capital Skywalkers facing off against the last place Russian Cash Vespio. The Skywalkers swept the Vespio the first time around, and it's more of the same this time as well. The Vespio can't get their offense going as the Skywalkers' Agames puts up 4 of the team's 8 blocks to go along with his 25 winners and 2 serving aces, and Hyundai Capital wins in straight sets for 3 points. Now moving on, top Major League free agent Chu Shin-soo is still in talks with several teams, but it's the Texas Rangers that topped the short list. Reports say that they could nab him with a 6-year, $120 million deal, but that they're leaning towards a 5-year agreement with a 1-year team option. Other factors are obviously at play here, with Nelson Cruz and Masahiro Tanaka still on the market, but the longer they wait, the pricier the Choo Choo Train's ticket will become. And ending off, it was the talk of the town all throughout Wednesday. Ki Sung-young's miracle goal lifted Sunderland over powerhouse Chelsea in the English League Cup quarterfinals. The chance came in the 118th minute in extra time when Ki slotted one towards the left post, propelling his team to the 2-1 victory at home. He called the goal, the first in his English Football League career, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Choi. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
It was a mild winter day here in Korea with snow showers in some regions.
That's right, but I hear colder weather is on its way tomorrow. For details, let's turn things over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, fill us in.
Good evening, guys. Don't get too used to the warmer than seasonal average weather because things will take a big dip tomorrow. Now, Seoul's morning low will drop to -5 degrees with a daytime high of just -2, which is 8 degrees lower than today. And temps will drop further on Friday morning, and it looks like things will stay that way throughout this week. Taking a look at the current conditions, now the central regions are under a low pressure trough, which is why those regions will see about a centimeter of snow overnight. The cold will be accompanied by snow in the west coast regions, so those of you in Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces should get anywhere between 1 to 5 centimeters of snow. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul tops out at -2 degrees, meanwhile Daegu and Gwangju hit 3 and 2 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Jeju peaks at -5, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 6 and -11 degrees respectively. Well, that's all for now, and back to you guys.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's a broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.